Welcome ladies and gentlemen, today I want you to show the Magicka Nightblade PvE build for Horns of the Reach. There's quite a few changes, really exciting changes. As you see, I have 81 spell critical with the Shadow Mundus, that's insane. A lot of Magicka and nice health. I will put my focus on the rotation and DPS parts so you can compare. I will just quickly go through the gear because you can find all that kind of stuff on my website. I will put the link into the description. I'm using a 5-1-1 setup. So 1 heavy, 1 medium, 5 light. 5 Julianos, 5 Mother Sorrow with spell damage here and 1 Ice Heart. Each of those crit bonus here, the 1066 spell critical, is about 5%. So we have 2 of those in this set. And 2 of those here, plus the last piece bonus is 11.5% crit. So from Mother Sorrow alone you already get like 21.5% overall. Then another 10 from this and another 5 from this. And we also keep the 300 spell damage and the max Magicka all the time. Maelstrom weapons, you can use them. You don't really need them anymore because there is better things now. I focus on single target DPS for raids, that's why I've chosen 2 infused weapons. Back bar lightning staff with a shock enchantment, front bar absorb magic enchant. Now why the shock on the back bar? Simply, if you weapon swap, the shock enchantment will keep proccing even though you weapon swapped, because you applied the blockade on the back bar with the shock enchant on the weapon, so it keeps proccing on the front bar. Having infused on both bars helps also. First off, it keeps the strength of the shock, and it also helps with Magicka restore, because you will get a lot from that. We will analyze that in the combat metrics parts in a second. Then we have a fire stuff here and the shock stuff back bar. That's very important because you have a few abilities that are single target, and if you look at the destruction stuff ability like passive, flame stuff 8% more single target, lightning stuff 8% AoE. But you need to make sure to have a destruction stuff ability slotted. So we have the Fiery Rage here and the blockade here. If you want, you could swap that around. But I kinda like this setup, plus blockade of storms is nice because you can proc off balanced. And it also has a chance to proc concussion. Concussion 8% more damage on bosses, off balance 10% more. Don't forget that. Could you use Scathing Mage? Yes, you could. Is it better than Juliana's? No, not really. That's why I say this combo here is so insanely strong. And the shock enchantments deal about 3k, like this here, this is about 3k. And the magic damage enchant about like 2k. We will see that in a second. Could you use a monster set? Yes, you could. Will you get more DPS? Not really. There is a lot of things you can choose, but you will always more or less end up with the same DPS. It's very important that you put more points into spell erosion because we are not using sharpened anymore. Then Elfborn, I put more points in here because we have 80% crit. So it's more important than elemental expert actually, because this only scales to 15%, this to 25%. So you want more points here. Thaumaturge 75 for the exploiter. And this here pretty basic and standard like always. Here I mixed it a little bit. So why do I say 52 in the spell erosion? So when you look, each boss has 18.2k penetration. We get 4k from here. We get, where is it, light armor? Almost 5k from here, so that's 9k. Then when we have a tank or like a healer that applies elemental drain or like any major breach, is another 5.3k. So we end up more or less with about like 14 to 15k penetration. A tank has an infused weapon, maybe even with Torux. So he has a Crusher enchantment on there, gives us another 2 to 2.3k penetration, plus Alcast another 3k, but you need to make sure whether you have those buffs or not. If you don't have those buffs, then it might be important to put more points into spell erosion. It might be even worth running a sharpened weapon over infused if you're not at the penetration cap yet. But for me, I know I have those rate buffs, so infused will definitely be stronger. In terms of skill setup, when we look at the rotation, let me just quickly show you the rotation on this one, what I do. I have all my dots on the back bar, so I have Blockade of Storms, Crippling and Twisting. So what I do is, back bar is really simple. When Blockade of Storm is about to run out, I reapply Blockade, Crippling, Twisting. And once I have those reapplied, I swap back to the front bar. This here is always the same. We also have a shield here, in case something hits you really hard, you want to have a shield up, you need that in raids. If you don't use this in raids, you're totally potato mode, just saying. Soul Harvest on the back bar. You see, while slotted, anytime you kill an enemy you gain 10 ultimate. In trash fights, where we use shock stuff for heavy attacks, adds die, you get a ton of ultimate. Then obviously Inner Light gives a 7% more max Magicka. Front bar. Now here, Merciless Resolve. You know, when you have 5 light attacks, the bow procs, you can shoot it. It's really important to keep up. We usually use it twice before we reapply it. Siphoning attacks helps a lot with sustain, so we want to make sure to have this. So what I usually do is, back bar is fixed, and then here I always do use it twice, so 2 spectral bows before I reapply it, and I just reapply this when it runs out. And Swallow Soul, usually can use it between 1 or 2 times before you have to reapply it. So just to show you what it looks like before you engage Siphoning attacks, then Merciless, to have those ready to go, and then you apply your dots, and then you weave funnel till the bow procs, you shoot the bow. You weapon swap about 1 to 2 seconds before your blockade runs out. That's very important, because you never actually want to let it run out, otherwise you have problems. That's what you need to know. You can track it with like surrender or other things if you want to. So the rotation is not really difficult. So even if you fuck up here, it's not that bad, because as long as you have the dots running, it's easy. You might think, yeah, but Twisting Path is 11 seconds. This is 8 seconds, 8 seconds, so we reapply this too early. Yes, we do, but this is just really simple. Like if you have to reapply this on a separate cooldown, all your brain capacity will be focused on trying to keep up all the dots. So what are you doing in the raid? You're looking at the dot trackers and not what happens around you, and what happens then, you die. So that's why I have just those back bar, because it's a no-brainer to reapply those, right? Even if we waste some time on that. If you're really good Magicka Nightblade, maybe you want to use this on the front bar, because you don't want to reapply it too early. Like I've said, higher chance to die. Now, another thing, Impale. In Morrowind, like the modifiers were bugged. Only hit for like 33k. Now, modifiers got fixed. It hits for like 45k. That's insane. So let us do a DPS parse on the 6 million dummy, so you can actually compare to what you get and what I get. Keep in mind, we are not at the penetration cap, so you will get lower DPS as in Morrowind, because we're not using a sharpened weapon. But it doesn't really matter, this is just here, so you get an idea of what the rotation looks like. Okay, we quickly analyzed the combat metrics parse. See, our sustain was really great. Now, if we are in a raid, we have access to bubbles or spears, we can easily sustain a light attack rotation. But keep in mind, in Halls of Fabrication, there is drain mechanics, so maybe you still want to run Witch Mother's Brew, maybe you want to do more heavy attacks. In the end, that's up to you. You need to decide, oh, am I happy with my sustain? If yes, leave it. If no, have to change something. Now, how do we get this sustain? You see the base regeneration 478 per Magicka per second. Minor Magicka steal this from the elemental drain, 262. Restore Magicka, those are the potions that they use on cooldown, 182, so that's a lot. Then siphoning attacks, 2 hits. This is the hit the moment it runs out. Those are the small ticks. It's like 250 together, so it's almost as much as minor Magicka steal. So this is really strong. Absorb Magicka enchantment on our front bar on the Inferno stuff. 39 hits, gives us 108. Now, can you get more of this? Technically, yes, because remember, the enchantment on the back bar procs more. So you could run the Absorb Magicka on the back bar instead of the front bar, and it probably goes up to like 150 to 200 to get even more out of this Absorb Magicka enchantment. Now, I will get to that in a second. Then we have the heavy attacks. Also, like I did 3, so overall they have a 72 Magicka per second return, actually also not bad. So you see heavy attacks restore a lot of Magicka. Now we had the Major Breach, minor Magicka steal from elemental drain. This gives us 5280 spell penetration. And remember, if you want to get the similar result on the target dummy here, I have around 14 to 15k spell penetration. You can get more DPS on a target dummy if you hit 18k, but is it worth hitting 18k alone? Not really, because in a raid you will over penetrate then, and you will like end up with less DPS in the raid. But if you're really skeleton DPS horny, then you need more penetration. Off balanced, this gives us 10% more damage, we had 80% uptime, vulnerability 8% more damage, 61% uptime. This varies a lot. Now, how do we get off balanced? Like Blockade of Shock, every time concussion is present on the boss, off balanced will proc when a Blockade of Shock is on the ground. Now concussion, this is like minor vulnerability is concussion. How do you get concussion on the boss? Simple, with shock abilities. Now AoE abilities have a really small chance to proc it. I have an article on my website, status effects, in the endgame section. You can check it out there. The most important factor is the charged weapon, like the shock enchantment. Enchantments have a 20% chance of proccing status effects like concussion. Destruction stuff passive has a really nice one actually, which increases the chance of proccing status effects by 100%. So we have a 40% chance of proccing concussion on the enemy every time this goes off. Now we are using infused weapons. So like the base cooldown on damage enchantments is 4 seconds. But because we use infused weapons, it's 50% faster. So it hits like something like every 2 seconds or something, right? Or yeah, something like that. So let's say just every 2 seconds. I mean, we had 66 hits here in 167 seconds. So you can kind of calculate yourself how much it procs. That's a lot. That's why we have such a high concussion uptime. Now keep in mind, in a raid, you want to aim for like a 90% vulnerability uptime at least. Because that's really important. If you already have 90% uptime on vulnerability, you might want to run the Absorb Magicka on the back bar. Because on the back bar, the enchantment procs more because the Blockade of Shock is there. So you just need to make... On the bar you have Blockade, the enchantment will proc more, like it's simple as that. I always run Blockade on back bar, but if you run it on the front bar, maybe you need to place it there. And you will Deal a little bit less damage, maybe there's a 500 damage difference to the charged one. But your sustain through the Absorb Magicka will go way up because it will proc way more often. You see, charged weapon 66 procs, Absorb Magicka 39 proc. So it will probably proc twice as much, giving you like 200 Magicka per second, and that's a lot. Now, the damage numbers are just like our average stats: 44k Magicka, 2.6k spell damage and 80% spell crit. Now, overall critical hits, we had 81% of the time. So if you calculate all those numbers together, we had like 81 overall crits. That's really nice. And you see, the yellow one is shock damage and this lila one is magic damage. And we only have 2 fire abilities. Everything else is either shock or magic damage on a Nightblade. This is a AoE damage. This is also AoE damage. And AoE damage with damage over time. Those are the 2 strongest abilities. Then we have Assassin's Will, single target, direct hit, 39k hits, so really nice. This is the max hit, and here you see the average. Now Impale. Basically last week when I was testing, it hit for 33k max. Now they fixed the modifiers, it hits for 46k max. So they really changed it. So Impale works correctly again, and it's really worth slotting again. That's more or less it. I hope it's kinda clear how we get those numbers, and it's just really important to keep up the buffs. You see, like 89%, you will not get much higher than that on Breach, like the spell resistance debuff and that kind of stuff. I hope you understand it. If you have like any question, or maybe just to show you, I did a few more. And you see, it was always between 35 and 36k with my current setup. You probably can get a little bit more on the live server because I have a 200 ping here on the PTS. So it's like animation cancelling is a little bit slower, but yeah. Anyway, if you have any questions about the build, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. I will put the DPS parse onto my website, so you also can go check it out there if you want to. Make sure, do not forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. Cheers.